trying to work out the bugs here with what's going on with whatever sound issues everybody's having. But welcome this afternoon to the discussion about the Fulbright U.S. student program. The way my screen right now is that I can only see my PowerPoint. So if you have questions, by all means, either unmute yourself and ask the question as we're going through, or if you want to put it in the chat, I can address them at the end. What I want to give you is just really sort of a quick overview of what the Fulbright U.S. student program is. So right out of the gate, if you are looking up information about Fulbright, you do want to Google Fulbright U.S. student program, because there is this is the program, obviously, for students. There's also a program called Fulbright Scholar, and that's generally intended for faculty. So definitely you want to be looking at Fulbright U.S. student program. So the Fulbright program, its overall sort of program goal or mission is to foster mutual understanding between nations, advance knowledge, and really just improve lives around the world. Fulbright just celebrated their 75th anniversary year in 2021. So it has been around since 1946 and was created by Congress. And it's sponsored by the Department of State, their Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs. And you'll also see reference to what the IIE. And so IIE is the organization that administers the U.S. student program in the U.S. and then overseas. It's going to be administered by commissions and a combination of commissions and or U.S. embassies. But like I said, the overall goal is to foster this sort of mutual understanding among nations and really kind of, just generally improve lives and understanding across the world. Fulbright also really is interested in being a diverse opportunity and an opportunity that really represents, sort of what does America look like? They want people from, across all stratums of U.S. society, and people that might be traditionally underrepresented in grants and programs and other initiatives. And they obviously don't discriminate based on any of the typical race, gender, color, national origin. The biggest thing is you have to be a U.S. citizen. Oops. So how is one eligible to be a Fulbright awardee? So basic eligibility is you need to be a U.S. citizen by the application deadline, which is typically in early to mid-October. You should have a bachelor's degree or the equivalent by the start of the grant. The reason for that is Fulbright is, as an experience, considered a graduate level program. So you do need to have that bachelor's degree. You can't have a doctorate at the time of application. You can be in the process. We've worked with students who are in PhD programs at Duquesne who have been awarded, but you cannot already have that doctorate. And as long as you meet the country-specific requirements. And that's something that we'll talk about in a few minutes. But each country, when you visit the Fulbright webpage, has specific information about the kinds of requirements that they might have, for being awarded to that particular country. Now, the program is open to people who are going to be graduating seniors. Obviously, this is the graduate symposium, so we are talking to grad students. You can be a recent graduate, or you can be an early career professional, including in the creative and performing arts, because they do have an area for creative and performing arts. However, you do not necessarily have to be even a current student. I have worked with students who, say, for example, went through the 5-year physician's assistant program, graduated, and then after they graduated and were out working in the field for a year, decided that this was still an opportunity that they wanted to have and something that they wanted to do. So I'm able to work with alumni students as well. Keep hitting the wrong button. Oops. Okay, so why Fulbright? I mean, there's other things out there. There's Marshall, there's Mitchell, there's Rhodes. So one of the nice things about Fulbright is there are significantly more awards available to many, many, many more countries than, say, a Rhodes, where honestly, Rhodes awards about 30. They have traditionally, since about 1908, only awarded 30 Rhodes scholarships to American students. That has not changed in over 100 years. And you obviously can only go to Britain. The program with Fulbright, you have this opportunity for, and access to potentially well over 2,000 awards in over 140, more than 140 countries. So there are two different types, there are two different mechanisms for Fulbright. There's what they call the study research grant, and this can either be an independent research project. You're going to study at a university or an arts project abroad. And as you can see, they're awarding 950 plus awards for study research. The time span can be anywhere from, say, 8 to 10 months, and like I said, approximately 140 countries. So just so you're aware, that 8 to 10 months, how you're going to know is you're going to take a look at, when you're investigating the individual country information, it's going to provide you with more specific information about the length of time you might be in country and when your award might start, depending on the nature of the award that you're applying for. The English teaching assistantships is basically what it sounds like. You're there to help teach English and U.S. culture in a classroom. And as you can see, there's well over 1,200 awards available in more than 75 countries. There are a couple of key things that you're going to want to take a look at when you're considering an English teaching assistantship. For some countries, it's not going to matter whether or not you know that native language. You're going there to teach, you could have a novice level of that language or little to no knowledge of that language. In some countries, that is going to be a little more difficult, and they may want you to be able to show that you have a little bit of that language experience, if for no other reason than to be able to do some basic communication, be able to get on a bus, be able to go to a restaurant or a store and purchase what you need. So again, it's going to be really important that you examine the information that's being provided on those individual country and award pages. Okay. So people always ask, well, what exactly do I get if I get a Fulbright? And unlike some awards, if some of you might be familiar with, the NSF Graduate Research Fellowship, they tell you specifically it's about $42,000. The reason why Fulbright does not place a dollar amount on the award is because it really is going to vary based on the country where you'll be traveling. You will definitely get round trip airfare, and you will be receiving a monthly stipend. However, that stipend is going to be based on the cost of living in that host country. So again, it's going to vary. Once you receive notice that you've been awarded, you're going to start to receive more information about what is that monthly stipend going to look like. And to be honest with you, I will be quite honest with you, I'm new to this, only about 2 years now, but the feedback that I'm getting from our Duquesne students who have had Fulbrights is that basically, rather than you receiving sort of a monthly, disbursement or whatever, it's sounding like what happens is you typically are getting your funding. They're calculating it based on what you need to live per month, but you might be getting it in 2 disbursements or 3 disbursements. So you kind of have to be able to budget your money. So that's something to think about, rather than getting sort of this monthly paycheck. You'll also receive accident and sickness benefits. Generally, it's also recommended that maybe you do still maintain whatever health care that you might have. I'm not 100% sure on what those benefits look like. Then there's some other possible benefits. For example, in some countries, you may be able to get support for a dependent to come with you. There may be like a research allowance associated with it, language lessons or some additional activities. In addition, Fulbright is actually great with accommodating people with disabilities or special health considerations, from what I have seen. So certainly don't let any of those kinds of concerns hold you back from not applying. I mean, I think that they are very They're very welcoming and they are very accommodating when it comes to sort of any needs that you might have. Now, following obviously having your opportunity and having your Fulbright award, you have access obviously to this network of alumni, the State Department's alumni website, and then you also get what's known as, you get 12 months of what they call non-competitive eligibility hiring status within the federal government. So it kind of, if you're considering, a job in the State Department, a job somewhere within the federal government, you sort of have a little leg up because you're now part of that non competitive eligibility group. In addition, you'll have a lifetime Fulbright email address, and then there's a Fulbright Association that sort of a national Fulbright Association, and then there are smaller local subgroups. Like there's one here in Pittsburgh that sort of have activities to bring Fulbrighters together, so you stay connected with the people who have had the same experience that you have. So, people always ask, what are some of the components of the application? Out of the gate, you'll be asked to provide some basic personal data, your name, a short abstract about sort of your intention when you go to this country. There's also going to be a short statement that you'll need to provide about how do you plan to engage while you're in country. And this is a big thing for Fulbright. Fulbright is, like I said, it's graduate level program, but also the thing that really sort of is the overall, there are two sort of overall components to Fulbright. And one is, how are you going to be a cultural ambassador when you travel to whichever country you choose? How are you going to come and how are you going to represent not only the US and where you're from, but also how are you going to represent Fulbright and really sort of embody, the mission of the Fulbright program? So they really want to know, how are you going to engage? I mean, let's say you're going there to do research. They want to know that you're not just going to be sitting in the library or the archives or, the entire time you're there. And when we say engage, it doesn't even necessarily have to be the engagement, sort of think more broadly, think about who you are as a person. The engagement doesn't necessarily mean, how am I going to still engage on an academic or a scholarly level? For a lot of people, this means, I've played volleyball my entire life, or I'm really interested in engaging with a swim club, or, find ways that you can sort of engage and get to know people, and they can get to know you as an American, and sort of understand more about American culture. Because again, it is about how do we understand each other and how do we sort of broaden the reach and, function as societies. And obviously, they want to know sort of what your future plans are beyond Fulbright. And this has a lot to do with what they refer to as, how will Fulbright help you on your trajectory? How is it a step in the process of where you'd ultimately like to be or what you'd ultimately like to do? This isn't, well, I thought it would be super cool to go to Africa, but it doesn't really relate to what I want to do in life. I mean, there has to be some intentionality about what you're doing and why. Okay, so second component of the application is going to be your essays. The first is going to be your statement of grant purpose. And excuse me, you can see research study is going to be a 2-page max. English teaching assistantship is a 1-page max. It's not a lot of space to say what you intend to do while you're there, but it does force you to be pretty concise. That is something that, I'm happy to always read, drafts. Certainly, faculty advisors can do the same for you. I do read them a lot, edit them down, make suggestions. And also, as we talk about sort of, we have what's called a campus review committee, and they'll offer the same suggestions. Now, the second piece that you're going to need is something called your personal statement. And for both applications, this will be 1-page max again. Think about the personal statement. This isn't sort of a regurgitation of, this isn't a regurgitation of your CV or your academic transcript. What the personal statement is is really an opportunity. This is the one place where the reviewers and Fulbright get to kind of really know who you are, what drives you, what circumstances might have brought you to where you are, why you're choosing the path that you choose. And I mean, I've seen some very sort of creative ways of addressing this. I don't know that there's any one right or wrong way to address this, except to say, don't make it. Sort of that regurgitation of your academic CV. This is, like I said, an opportunity for them to get to know you because, in a lot of instances, they're never going to get to talk to you personally. This is your statement. This is where you really have to make the impact. Now, um, the third section of your application is actually going to be the important thing here is your three letters of reference, and they are, they can be academic in nature. Generally speaking, you don't want them to necessarily be like a family member or anything like that. That's not doable. Um, but it could be, an organization that you worked with closely. It could be you've had involvement with a campus job. I recommend sort of a balance between the academic and then sort of socially. And one of the things that the reviewers are going to be, really are asked to address is also not only, are you academically ready to do this, but are you socially sort of what is your ability to adapt to situations, to work in groups that might make you a little uncomfortable or might be outside of the norm of what you typically do. They're going to be asked, while you're also to a certain extent asked to address that, they're going to be asked to address that as well. You'll see their foreign language evaluation. That would be for the countries in which you do have to have a certain level of foreign language ability. And again, that's going to be found when you're looking at your individual country pages. Obviously, your transcripts. And then the others. So when if you are going abroad to do a research project or study project, you have to have what's called a letter of affiliation. That letter of affiliation basically should be from either a faculty member at a university that you've reached out to, or potentially, like a nonprofit organization. Basically, it's somebody on the ground who is saying, we're willing to host you, we're willing to be here to oversee your project. So, for example, right now we have a PhD student in Germany. So that PhD student in Germany, he's doing work towards his dissertation at the University of Heidelberg, and so he was able to contact a faculty member who wrote a letter of affiliation stating, "Yes, we're willing to host him. We're willing to provide oversight and any assistance that he might need." It's a relatively simple one-page letter, but it indicates that there's somebody on the ground who knows that you're coming, who's willing to host you. Similar situation, we had another student who was actually going to do a research project in Africa. In this case, because it was medically related, her letter of affiliation was actually not from a university, but rather it was from the hospital, someone at the hospital where she would be affiliating during the course of doing her research. So those are, sort of some of the variations on letters of affiliation. If you would be doing an arts project, there may be supplementary materials that you might need to provide. And those, you sort of get into that as you're looking at those applications. So what makes a good project? What's going to be factors in sort of the selection process? And as you can see, sort of what's the feasibility of the project that you're proposing, your academic or your professional record. And this is where one of the things that I think I like about Fulbright is that there are a lot of other opportunities out there that will clearly state, you absolutely have to have a 3.7 or you have to have a 3.5. Fulbright's a little bit different. When you listen to Laura Siri from Fulbright Talk, she's like, look, we've gone as low as, a 2.9 or a 3.0 because there were other things about that application that really said to us, this person's going to be able to do this. And they're going to be, there might have been extenuating circumstances. for why why maybe they don't have a 3.5 or they don't have a 3.7. So in this case, the GPA isn't necessarily the overriding factor in how they're going to select you. Obviously, they want to know that academically you can handle what you're proposing, but they're not necessarily looking for a hard and fast GPA. Um, Personal qualifications. Again, this gets down to things like how adaptable are you to, circumstances that may be outside of the norm of what you typically do. What other experiences have you had, to sort of make you a candidate for this? The language preparation, obviously, if there is a language requirement, any preferences established by that host country, and the extent to which you've kind of clearly articulated that your project is going to help advance Fulbright program goals. And again, requirements of the program in the foreign countries. And finally, they obviously want to look at achieving some diversity within their selections. Okay, so how does this all play out in terms of a timeline? The applications are slated to open at the end of this month, the end of March. From everything that I've heard, that's not changed. Um, so really, once the applications open, go in, create yourself a username and password, start to look at the application process, the application itself. You can go in, you can create an application. That's not a problem. There's nothing about that that says you absolutely have to do this if you've gone in to check it out. So don't feel like you can't go in there, create your username, create your password, and actually start to plug stuff in. I mean, things happen, and at some point, you may decide, you know what, this isn't the right opportunity for me, or now it's not the right time. But don't hold back from actually going in and checking out the application as soon as it opens. So from April to around September, you're thinking about your project, you're writing your application. I'm going to try and plan some writing workshops potentially over this summer. So there's an opportunity to maybe even have your peers kind of review what you're doing. We have to we set an earlier deadline called the campus deadline, because you can see the deadline this year for national submission is October 11th by 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We have to set an earlier deadline than that because, as I mentioned to you, we have something called a campus review committee. They are faculty who have either been Fulbrighters themselves or they have sat on the National Review Committee. And what they're going to do is review the pieces of your application. And then we're going to have, either depending on conditions, we'll either have Zoom or in person, a meeting, a process to sit down with you for about an hour. They refer to it as an interview. It's a little more relaxed than that. They're just going to ask you to sort of verbally explain your project or your, why you want to go where, let's say you want to do an English teaching assistantship somewhere. Why? Why did you pick this country? What do you intend to do while you're there? So it really is more, just starts out as a discussion. And then based on the discussion, they're going to offer you some feedback on your application. It is up to you what you do with that feedback. So we need to leave enough time. The August 29th date is established so that I can get the materials out to the committee. We have time to meet. We have time for them to review it. And then there's time to meet with you, but still give you sufficient time to make any edits that you may want to make to the application. I also take the feedback that I get from the campus review committee. We have to fill out a form called the campus committee evaluation form, and we're asked to respond to a couple of things. How do we feel you fit into the overall Fulbright program? Do we feel that you you would be able to sort of adapt and, to any circumstances that may come up? There's basically like 3 questions we have to respond to. So once we have to upload that campus committee evaluation around this same time. So The review, so you'll see there, November to December, there's the national screening committees are going to meet, and this is the US level review. And again, these are, excuse me, faculty from across the US who may have been Fulbrighters themselves. They have experience with this. They're reviewing blocks of applications, and typically these are grouped based on the country where you want to go and and whether or not you want to be English teaching or study research. I happened to sit in on one of these, and it was a fascinating process. And this was the one that I sat in on was for Germany. And the question that oftentimes came up was sort of, well, so they want to do this research project, but why do they need to do it in Germany? This can be done anywhere. So make sure that excuse me, your project is appropriate and really needs to happen in that country. So the national screenings happen November and December. So then what happens is by the end of January, you're going to receive notification telling you you're either a semifinalist or you were a non-select. So if you are a semifinalist, awesome. That is fantastic because, quite frankly, Fulbright gets anywhere in the vicinity of 9 to 11,000 applications in any given year. So to be even a semifinalist is pretty awesome. What happens then from, say, January to well, they say May, but honestly, it's usually till about April. Um, the host country, there's either Fulbright commissions in the host country or there's the U.S. Embassy. The applications that were selected by the U.S. National Screening Committee are now going to be forwarded on to these commissions or embassies. And so they're going to go through the process. You may hear from them. There's potential that you may hear from them about an interview. Not all countries do interviews, some of them do. Obviously, those are happening via Zoom, like right now. Now, once they go through this process, starting as early as March, but honestly, it's more often than not hitting into early April, they'll start to send out final selection and notifications. What you're going to find out is you are either a finalist, you are an alternate, or you are a non-select. If you are a finalist, you're going to start to receive instructions about next steps that you need to take, as well as, you have a window of time to decide whether or not you do want to accept the award. Alternates, you're on a list, and if there are people who drop out or for whatever reason, then you might get notified depending on where you are on the alternate list. And then obviously non-select, you weren't selected. All right, so I would highly recommend really just sort of combing over in depth the Fulbright website, because there's a ton of information there. You can obviously email them. You can contact me. I am always around. I'm definitely willing to answer questions. You can start to follow them on social media. And they do have some nice instructional videos as well. But like I said, my email is my last name, first initial. I'll also put that in the chat. And obviously, it'll be on the recording as well. We'll make that information available. But I'm happy to meet with you, anytime during the process, multiple times during the process, as because I've even, worked with students who were sort of on the fence, like they had an interest in two different countries and two different programs. And let's sort of talk that through and help you make the best decision, because you can only apply to one country at a time. You can't say, well, I might be interested in English teaching in Spain and, possibly doing something in Portugal. No, you have to narrow it down. You're only applying for one opportunity. All right, so I'm going to close out of this so that I can come back and stop sharing. All right. So I just wanted to see if anybody had any questions. Like I said, certainly feel free to sort of unmute yourself with any questions that you may have. We'll obviously put the recording up on the website. But in addition, I'm available to talk whenever. I'm in the office 5 days a week. So, and I'm always happy to either set up a meeting via Zoom or, in person, whatever works best for you. We can meet at Starbucks. We can meet wherever. I'm putting my email in the chat right now. All right. Okay. Does anybody have any questions? No? Sorry, my allergies are out of control at the moment. See you, Gabriella. All right. Well, like I said, don't hesitate to reach out. And if you have questions, or we'll be making this available as part of the recordings.
Thank you.
Sure. Have a great day.